Okay, we are now live and we are recording. So I think we just need to call the meeting to order, Mayor, and then you can turn it over to me.
All right, I got 6:06 p.m. Go ahead and call our meeting to order, and it's all you, Ron.
All right, it looks like we have everybody in attendance. I'm running the meeting tonight. We've had a few staff that have not been feeling well, so I figured I could handle it. Hopefully there's not too many technicalities that pop up that I got to figure out, but I think we'll be fine. And this is the first of a series of mini retreats or strategic planning sessions, however we want to characterize them, so that we can kind of get a group consensus on things that we can do to prep for moving forward in some cases, and in other cases, actually pulling the trigger and moving forward on some projects. This is the first meeting, so we're going to look at more of some of those ministerial type decisions that we need to make at the retreat just as a group. So this will be the easiest of all the meetings that we'll participate in as we go through this process. But we started to put together some of the other sessions and some of the other groundwork. We've been assembling that for the last month or so and testing those with different consultants to make sure that we're headed in the right direction, at least enough to where we can bring it to council, have good conversations about some of these projects. I will just say overall, I'm really excited about this year. We have done a lot together the last 3 or 4 years. And I think, as you saw in the state of the city, just looking back, a lot of very unprecedented projects have been done in the last 3 or 4 years by the city. But the next 2-year period is really going to surpass that by 5 or 10. There is just a lot of stuff that we're about to do with some decisions from you all. But we've been, in addition to accomplishing a lot of projects over the last few years, what we've been doing is setting the city up to pull the trigger and actually be able to execute some of those larger projects. And so there's always this look forward. There's always staging the city for the next round of projects 3, 4, 5 years out. And we'll be making some of those decisions as we go along. However, the outlook is really good. I'm really excited about what's on our horizon for the next couple of years. So on our agenda, like I say, I left most of this administrative. Even though we'll talk about these things and reach consensus, we won't actually vote on them in this work session format. We'll just throw them on the next council calendar or the appropriate council meeting calendar for you all to then open it up to public comments if there is any on any of these items. So I'm going to go ahead and share, just for the purpose of talking, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let me see if I can find that. Share my screen to all panelists. Okay, I like that. Make sure I can find the right screen to share here. Go. Okay. Now I can share my screen. All right, I've just got some I've got in PowerPoint format, some of these presentations, and some are just I think that's right. As I go along through these presentations, this is more of an informal meeting. It's really just for us to get together and bounce some ideas off of each other in some cases, or just do a comprehensive review of documents in other cases. So if anybody needs to take a break, use the restroom. I know I can go long sometimes. Feel free to either address the group and we can take an official break for a few minutes and stretch, or just get up. And if you feel like you missed something important or you want to hear more about it, we can recover that ground. So right now we'll go ahead and start with the council member protocol and procedure handbook. Council got to see and input on this last year, but we never really did get to bring it forward for a comprehensive review in our retreat. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. And I'll go through some of these changes. Can everybody see that screen okay? Everybody thumbs up? Okay, great. I'm just going to kind of scroll through this on the screen just so you can see it, but I know you all have copies of this that were delivered to you. And I'll just kind of highlight some of the changes. I won't go through it page by page, but if you, in your review, have seen something that you have a question about or a comment about, feel free to stop me or jump in as I'm talking, and we can address those. Mainly what's changed from the last council member handbook to this council member handbook, other than rearranging it so that it met some more organized order, is the sources citations, both in the table of contents here and in the document. And we did this intentionally for a couple of reasons, but oftentimes when we get new council members and they come in, we want them to be able to go read those sources that we've summarized in these books themselves, if they want to take the time to do that. And
Hey,
so,
Ron,
yes.
real quick, are we supposed to be looking at your file folder, or are you going through the table of contents and everything?
Can you
Did
repeat?
you open? Did you open up the file, or are we just looking at your file folder?
You're looking at my
Your
file
shared
folder.
screen?
Can you see where it says sources on the screen?
Okay.
No, we see your file folder where it has all your files in it.
Yeah. If you clicked on your document, we don't see that.
Okay.
Did that go to another screen?
Okay. So you just see my file folder. That's what you see right there?
Do you have multiple screens, Ron?
Yeah.
The screen that you're sharing is actually the file explorer where the document is sitting. So take that document and drag it onto that screen. That's the screen that you're sharing.
Okay. Let me see if I can do that.
Where's Colleen when you need her?
I guess Ron's coming to my house next time.
I'll tell you, Mayor, I might have to do that.
So where your folder, the Council Procedures and Protocol 2020 is at?
Yeah.
Whatever screen that's on, drag the actual document over to that screen because it's only showing us that one screen.
Okay. Yeah, just take me a second there. Get out of here. There we go. So can you see the document now?
Yep, we're good.
Yep.
So you see where it says sources?
Yep.
Ready? All right. I may need more technical help in the end, Mayor, so thank you for jumping in there. So basically, here's what we did. We cited the sources. after the table of contents. And then it just goes into the authority of the council through the charter, how you would suspend or amend these rules into the general rules. And like I say, if you see right here, see where it says ORS 1926550. Everybody see that? Okay, just make sure I got the right screen up. That's the in-text citation, basically. So you can go to those ORSs and read more. We've just summarized different things of, why a meeting has to be set up the way it does, how we have to notice, those types of things. And we've used various sources. LOC's sources are generally the best practices type sources, so they're not necessarily a requirement of the council from an action. It's just best practices. Usually the requirements are based meeting notices and acting of an action like an ordinance, Open Public Meetings Act. Those are the requirements under ORS or under the law. One of the things we added to the book was the statement of economic interest and the citations for that. That's something that all council members have to fill out by April. If you haven't done that before, if you're new and you haven't done that, it's fairly easy to do online, but certainly staff can help if you need any assistance with that. It's actually not real invasive. It's pretty high level. They will bug the heck out of you, and if you don't do it by April 15th, and they can levy fines. Generally, they don't like to do that. They just assume get you to file it. But if you need any assistance, you can always contact staff. Again, roles and responsibilities at the meetings. We try to preserve as much of the old handbook as we could, but there are, we did rephrase some of the chapters just so that we could cite the sources, or some of the paragraphs, sorry, so we could recite the sources. This is the responsibility of the presiding officer. That really hasn't changed. That's all outlined in our charter. President of the council. We memorialized that at the first council meeting of an odd number year, the council will elect a president from its membership who will fill in when the mayor's unable to serve in his capacity or her capacity, whomever is in that position. The actions and responsibility of the city council. You are the policy makers. You're the policy board for the city. You act in all quasi-judicial proceedings. That's type 3. We don't say that, but type 3. And then you serve as part of the budget committee. You approve the city budget. And you also serve as the Board of Appeals for all quasi-judicial actions 1 and 2. And then you all have equal votes. We know the powers of the council is in the whole. And then we just go in and some of the specific roles of the mayor. Our liaison commissions, we don't really have a whole lot of those. There's a lot of opportunity to be regional liaisons in different things. I know Dell is serving on MWAC right now, but there are other opportunities. And if you want to know more about those or take an interest in those, certainly just come see me and we can point you in the right direction for those. Internally, if this wasn't, COVID time, if we weren't social distancing, we might have a couple of council members come out and spend a little bit more time in our public works operation, getting to see firsthand some of those challenges, right along with a police officer occasionally. Those are things that we can do. It's difficult to do in the midst of the COVID era, but certainly I think those are all good experiences for the council, we want to encourage you to do those activities at your level of interest. But of course, we have to be careful not to be tasking the staff with specific duties. You want to come talk to me about that. And that's just memorialized here. We talk about our meetings, special meetings. We do cite the ORSs on those. We also try to cite a lot. The LOC has a sample protocol manual or council handbook. We do try to cite some of those pages. Remember, they're intended to be kind of an all-inclusive. So even though we'll cite those and you can go read that information, sometimes the best practices for a large city may not necessarily work out as best practices for a city our size and vice versa. So just keep that in mind. You always have the right to recess or postpone a meeting, you know, if things are getting heated or if you feel like you don't have all the information that you need. Council always has the right to postpone.
Us? Never.
Work sessions, that's what we're doing today. We're calling this an official work session. And really the only difference between a work session is we typically don't take action at a work session, and we don't engage the public. It's really a time for us to have an uninterrupted period to discuss whatever the topic might be. And then we go back into the council meetings where then the public's welcome to engage in the conversation. But this is intended to raise that level of information to the policy board. Executive sessions, as you know, they're limited. We can have executive sessions for a number of things that are outlined in ORS 192, 610, and there are some exemptions. You know, the negotiation of collective bargaining agreements, the negotiating to purchase real estate, litigation discussions, things of that nature. There are some disciplinary reasons why we would go into an executive session. Those are the main issues that we would pretty much go into executive session. Otherwise, all of our sessions would be in the public venue. By law, we have to have public hearings. That's a formal process that, as you know, it has a certain structure to it where everybody has equal time under the law to provide information to council. And then, of course, our regular public meetings are, you know, there's always an opportunity for the public to engage the council there. We memorialize the order on the agenda, which hasn't changed since council set this the last time. And really what we did is we kind of pared this down. There used to be, I don't know, like 23 agenda topic items. And, you know, we would kind of go through and say, okay, we don't have any of this, we don't have any of that. And it was very detailed. And we got together, I think it was actually might have been the first session of retreat discussions. And we said, you know, we could be more efficient with these agendas and still get all the topics in. If we have business under one, they could fit under one of these 13 topics.
I was going to say, Ron, you know, not that it really matters too much, but we seem to pretty frequently kind of mix the mayors and councilors' reports and initiatives and the good of the order. Do we want to combine that just into one thing? Does it really matter? I know good of the order is technically separate, but we tend to kind of just do those two together.
Yeah, I think the only reason why we have, you know, for the most part, anything that council would want to bring up is under council initiatives and reports. You know, good of the order may be an afterthought. Sometimes I know when you say that and council given their report, I might have something to chime in, or I think that was put on there because also when we did this, I think there was some discussion about, well, what if, we should have public comment at the beginning of the meeting. We don't want them to interrupt unless there's a hearing. So while we're having our discussion on like new business of the day or old business, that's not really the time for people to engage. They really need to engage under public comment. But at the end, after we're all said and done, we wanted to have an opportunity for them to be able to readdress whatever council had done. And I think that was one of the ideas behind good of the order, but strictly up to you guys. It's your agenda. So if you want to mix the two, or if you want to change how that reads, I'm certainly open to whatever.
I mean, it's all kind of the same to me. We
Okay.
tend to do both at the same time anyway. And obviously, I'm the last person that's going to get my panties in a bunch if someone does a good of the order item before a report item.
Yeah. And if you guys see a better way to do it, certainly speak up and we can make that change. It's easy enough. Well, I'll go ahead and move on and you can think about it. And like I say, there may be, as we go through here, I was reading through this and, you read through these things and you make some of these little adjustments and then you leave it alone for a month and then you read it again and then you see something else. So there may be a couple of slight edits that I would make before this comes before the council. Just some wordsmithing, but nothing material. So you may see a couple of strikeouts and as it comes forward to you. So our ordinances and resolutions and motions, council, you'll take action. I mean, you can really do action in one of four ways. Formal action is done through an ordinance. Ordinance is more of a long-term action that you're going to do. So, you're going to form a water utility and this is what it looks like. And this is the authority. That's a long-term action. A resolution might be the rates, you're setting the rates for that year for the utility. So a resolution is more of things that will change frequently. An ordinance is really the law, right? It's that one thing that you don't want to change. You want to make sure that it has continuity. You can also take actions by motion. I mean, the council can simply just say, by the majority, we move to do this. And that is as binding as anything else that you would do. Typically, we do motions for less formal things. If it's something formal or something we want to document, especially if it directly impacts the community, we want to do that in a resolution or ordinance. But yes, you can take action that way. And then sometimes it's really also just consensus. That's less formal, but if the majority of you shake your head and give me the thumbs up and say, we want you to go off and do this, I'm going to go do it because that's as good as a motion in my opinion, as long as it's clear cut. But usually we try to do it by at least a motion. And so we did give council kind of like a little motion flow chart, sorry. And we also showed like what an ordinance looks like and a public hearing looks like in those flow charts. And so those will be included in your council member handbook packets. Sometimes the ordinance hearings can get a little confusing, especially between a legislative action and a quasi-judicial action, or an approval of an ordinance versus something else. So we developed that little flow chart. Hopefully you guys have seen it and it makes sense to you. You can make a motion, you can withdraw a motion. And really these examples of motions are just intended for our group, our policy board, to get to a decision point. If you did not follow the motion procedure correctly, but you took a vote as a majority to approve something, it's still approved. It's not invalid because you didn't necessarily follow the motion protocol. This is really just here to maintain order and to provide everybody equal time to debate the issue, that type of thing. So as long as we're getting to an end result and everybody feels good about it, that's really what matters. Now, procedurally, you can raise some conflicts with formal public hearings and things of that nature if we don't follow procedure. So we do try to use that public hearing script that we have anytime that we're going through that process. Potential conflicts of interest, oftentimes, there are going to be potential conflicts of interest. If you feel that way, talk to me about it in advance, or you might just bring it up at the meeting. If you want to do that, you're welcome to do that and say, I don't know if this is a conflict of interest. I just want to declare it. And then either you can abstain from the discussion, or the consensus may be you don't need to abstain. Bias, we talk about that a lot. And really one of the main things that we want to be careful of is ex parte contacts. We haven't had to go to a LUBA Board of Appeals decision, but I will tell you that I speak with city managers all the time. And when you go to the LUBA Board of Appeals, they microanalyze everything that you did. And oftentimes it's the most innocent things that come back to get you, or that raise eyebrows, or can be a technical error, so to speak, that opens up the appeal to more scrutiny. So things like that, you want to be real careful of. The big thing with an ex parte contact is to make sure that you disclose it at the hearing. If you disclose it, that really protects the city in those appeals, but we're better off not to have them if at all possible. Creating of committees and boards and commissions, you guys can do that anytime that you see fit. You are the authority. Generally, boards and commissions operate as an advisory capacity to the council. Really, the one that gets as close to the council from an authority standpoint as you can get is the Planning Commission, so to speak, because many of their type 2 decisions, even though they're appealable to the council, they're not necessarily all ratified by the council, so to speak. So that's one of the most authoritative. But, from my perspective, I know committees and commissions were the rage for a long time. I like to bring people in that are more, so it's more inclusive whenever we have things going on. The vision plan was a great example. We had a large community outreach process. And then we formed an ad hoc committee, but that was only to address the things that the large group had given the committee to work on. So, so that actually worked out really well. Removal of board members, you guys have the authority to do that. Citizens' rights, really we're just outlining things for them to do. I think this was one place that I had some wordsmithing that I wanted to include. Addressing the council. So if the public or a public entity wants to address the council, they do that under the public comment period. Typically, I don't officially assign an agenda item to somebody that just requested it. So if somebody from the public said, I want to get on the agenda and talk about, something they were upset about, I would tell them to address the council in public comment period. Really, agenda items are, we kind of reserve those for the council business. Now, this really goes to speak to the organizations that we're in partnerships with, things like Marion County, various departments in Marion County that we have an interlocal arrangement with. Maybe it's the Department of Health, or it's the commissioners want to come in and talk about something, things of those nature. We would use this process to put an agenda item on. Maybe they want to do a presentation about, drug addiction or smoking deterrence or whatever it might be, Census Bureau, those types of things. Those are organizations that we would put on the agenda. And we want to be careful about that. We're a small city, and so we haven't really had to deal with this, but we want to be real careful about just having a process where anybody can take time on the agenda, because then you'll get special interest groups that want to come and lobby the council, and they want to take. Go ahead.
I want to rewind just a little bit real quick.
Yeah.
So under 9.2, the membership and selection for committee members. So it states council can override the mayoral appointment or appointee by a 2/3 majority decision.
Yep.
It doesn't clarify, one, whether the mayor has a vote on that, and two, because we are a group of 7, 2/3 would be 4 people. So wouldn't that also, for our purposes, just be a simple majority?
Yeah, 2/3, so majority.
2/3 of 7 is 4.2.
Yeah,
Rough.
I think it's 5.
So it would require 5 because we round up.
I will clarify that for you, Mayor, just to make sure that we have the right number. But
Also with that, clarify, since the mayor is the one making the appointment,
yep.
When a vote occurs to approve that appointment, does the mayor have a vote? Or is it just the 6 council members? Because obviously the mayor's vote is in the affirmative if they are the one making that appointment.
I believe that you vote in all cases, because under our charter, you are a voting member of the board.
Okay. So, then,
So
yeah,
I believe you will always vote, even though it may be your initiative. I don't see a circumstance where you would. The only time that you may want to abstain from a vote would be, if it was something like
the previously mentioned section, a bias, ex parte conflict.
Yeah, or maybe the discussion was giving the mayor a $10 a month raise or something like that. Whatever that discussion, if it was something that was benefiting you, I would abstain. But for membership selection, I would think that you would be voting. But I'm going to double check that before this comes to council.
So yeah, just confirming whether that 2/3, whether it's something that we're rounding up, which would make it require 5 people, or whether it's 4.
Okay. And we've actually talked about this a number of times, but the process that at least you've decided to use, and I think previous mayors has been, is it's really been more by, let's figure this out as a group. But this is, I believe, under the charter, and that's why we wrote this way. I think under the charter, it's it's certain committees. So I'm going to also clarify that, just so if we're going to go with that 2/3 policy, we need to make sure it's specific to what the charter says. But I've got that note here, Mayor, so I will look at that. Was there anything else on that?
No.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to go through this a little fast, but not sound like I'm rushing. So I am just kind of scrolling and reading. But we do want to give citizens an opportunity to participate. What we don't want to do is, if we have, we've seen in modern politics where these groups come and they may not even be from our area, or they may be special interest groups. We just want to make sure we can protect the process so that everybody can get a voice. And so under state law, we don't have to provide an opportunity for public comments or public, for the public to come and engage the council. We just have to have an open public process for council decisions. But I will tell you, there's very few councils that will withhold that process from their citizenry, nor would I think with this council you would want to. But that's just a little tidbit of information. Written communications, I always encourage folks to write, even if they want to come, if they've got something to address the council and they want to come in person. I encourage them to write those things down, because sometimes they get nervous and when they're talking to the council, they might forget a piece. But it also then becomes part of the official record. What we may say in the condensed minutes is, John Smith addressed the council on this topic. We might not go into the details of every point John Smith made in those minutes. And so then that's a good way to get that into the record. And then for you all, our courtesy norms, these are just the things that we all agreed to. Sometimes groups don't agree all the time. And that happens. And, with our group under the law, it's the majority of the group prevails in the decision. And so sometimes we will have disagreement in a body. And the idea is to be able to maintain a relationship and a working process so that we can make future decisions, or we don't break down those relationships. And that's really what these courtesy norms are. Certainly if the group had other courtesy norms that they felt strongly about, we could include those and talk about those. And that's really up to you. And then our protocols really there's just a few, but oftentimes there's going to be some information that you will get that isn't in the public eye. Maybe it's through an executive session, or maybe it's just the course of a business correspondence from an individual. Even though some of those things could be made public through a public information request process, up until that point, some of that information is confidential. If I'm John Smith and I call you and talk to you about a development I'm thinking about doing, but I haven't put in an application, I haven't made a bid on the property yet, but I've got this great idea, that might not be something that you would want to go and talk at an open meeting about, because maybe that creates competition for him or his development, or some sort of an issue where now the landowner thinks the property is worth more. So just like us, we wouldn't want to talk about those things if we were within that process. So I think that's council. We did include, let me see, I didn't get to it yet. Council discussions, that's really just courtesies on debate, treat each other respectfully in public. Most of these we came up with as a group, or at least part of us did. Be open to ideas and testimony. Don't be closed-minded. Ask for clarifying information. If you feel like you don't have all the information, please do that. Praise in public, and if you're irritated by something that's occurred either by staff or by a fellow council member, call them up. If I've done something inadvertently that you're concerned about, or that has caused you any ill feelings, call me up, because I want to know about that. Most likely that certainly wasn't done on purpose, but may just be an oversight somehow, or a misunderstanding. Council members' behavior. Really, these are all these norm behaviors. Try to represent the city and the council in the best manner. Those are really, that's really just the intent. violating the code of conduct, you are elected by the people, and you can only be removed from office by the people. So another, group of council members cannot remove you. They can, however, publicly sanction you if there's a violation. Although that's a pretty extreme thing to do, and it's not happened so far, thank goodness. But there have been operational conflicts that have occurred that we have needed to talk about. So just know that. Interactions with staff, really the point there is we don't want an individual council member tasking staff with something. That they serve under the administrator's authority and purview, and our staff will look at every one of you as their boss. And if you come in and say, hey, I need this, or we should be doing that, it would not be unusual for them to just drop everything and do what you ask. And that's not really an effective way to operate the city. So we want to just maintain that separation and that relationship. Don't solicit political support from staff, things like that. We really want to be seen, and it's difficult to be seen as a neutral party when you're the established staff with an established set of policymakers during an election. But we really do want to be seen as a neutral party here for everybody. We work for you as the whole, as a group, and it doesn't matter what configuration is in that group of 7. Whatever direction you provide us as a group, that's the direction that we're going to follow. The communication plan, there was a resolution, and I think we readopted the resolution, which really just said that the mayor is the public relations officer for the council. The administrator is the public relations officer for the city. And in an official capacity, if we have something as a council or as a city to say, it really needs to be done in that venue. You don't get tasked very often, again, because we're kind of a low profile community. But if we had a high profile issue, it really doesn't matter. News media will call you. They'll get your number, they will call you. And you just want to be respectful that if it's something to do with you, what we recommend is if you want to address it, that you do that and you just say, because this doesn't affect the council or this is related to me, I'll give you my opinion, but certainly my opinion isn't necessarily the opinion of the rest of the body. Now, we went through a process a couple of years ago where the city council has a right by majority vote to appoint a different public information officer, and this is when we adopted this updated resolution. However, by default, I think that duty falls to the mayor. And so because we had a new election, and this is a new election cycle, just for clarification on this, it would be my opinion that for the council currently, our current mayor is the public information officer. And if you, as a new group, elected group, wanted to change that, then you would invoke the authority under Resolution 1119, and you, by majority vote, could change that. But by default right now, it is our mayor. A while back, a couple of years ago, it was not the mayor. The mayor actually didn't want to be in that position, and he would have to state that. I think
still don't want to be in that position, Ron.
So you that might be something that you would talk to the council at and decide who would want to do that. But Mayor, I feel like
we could just vote on the agenda just for posterity purposes and everything, right? We're on our odd numbered year. We chose the city council president. We can choose the public relations officer, public information officer, however we're going to write that out. If the council wants it to be me, yeah, sure, I'll do it. But I mean, if someone else wants to do it, have at it.
Yeah. And I just think that that has to be done by a council action because of the way that the city charter vests the authority of the mayor. So that we do have it outlined in resolution, but it really does need to be an action of the council. And all you have to do is say, put that on the agenda for discussion.
Yeah, just will we put it on the agenda for the next meeting?
Sure. Okay, great. All right, we did include some social media guidelines in this latest update for you all. And really, this is just to try to help you navigate some of the laws that are out there related to social media. Remove your elected titles from social media posts. That's our recommendation. And then if you're posting about anything that's related to the city, I would state in there that it's, hey, this is my opinion. This doesn't represent the opinion of the city. If you go on to talk about, actions the city took or work that the city did, it doesn't really matter if you try to separate yourself through title or disclaimer. You're probably engaging in something that would be considered public information material, meaning you could be required to maintain that material. We would maintain it because we don't have your social media accounts. We don't follow. I would like to tell you all that I follow everything that you post, but unless it rises to the attention of some public issue, I probably haven't read it because I don't visit your pages regularly, or at all. If you posted it on Community Connections, I may have seen it. That's but we're not tracking that information.
The social media stuff, Ron, and I don't know if they'll touch on it or not, but so if you use, whether it is your personal account or whether it's a separate account that you have made for your role as a city official, the general recommendation is, even if someone is coming onto the page making comments and being belligerent and all that kind of stuff, do not block anybody. There was a couple of court cases that were brought against now former President Trump. There is a court case currently going through the process for AOC regarding blocking people. And the general sentiment is that if they are a constituent of ours, it would violate their First Amendment for us to block them off of a page where discussion is taking place in regards to any kind of city policy.
Yeah. I might also recommend that if you're gonna discuss anything that's not a personal nature, that is actually city related, even if it's your personal account, if you're going to talk about roads and projects and policies and ordinances or things of that nature, tell people, hey, go here, here's a resource, anything that you feel like could be city related, even if you feel like I've just got my personal resident hat on, I don't have my council member hat on, but this may be city related topics. I would take screenshots of that, take screenshots of the comments, or print them out just so that you have a copy. Because if there is some sort of an action, where you get in trouble is not necessarily the content. Where you get in trouble is not being able to produce that content on demand. So
like with my little mayor page, I don't delete anything. I don't care how crazy someone's being. I don't delete anything.
Yeah, but once they post it in your thread and they delete it, then now you've lost control over that material that you're responsible for.
You can set it up on the settings so that they can't.
Okay. Okay, good. Good. Okay, well, then I think we beat that up enough, but just remember there is some liability there that you guys want to be aware of. Again, unless we had some crazy thing happen in the city, not that we couldn't, um, for the most part, our issues don't rise to these levels of court cases and suits and things of that nature. Walter, did you have something?
Ron, do you want me to re-sign this one and give it to you? You got the one I signed a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, and what I would think we would do is this would come to council for official adoption on a future agenda, probably the next one or one after that, but a future agenda. And then I would expect all council would sign this, the last page. We just need the last page. It's just your acknowledgement page that you've received it. And then we'll put that in your file. You all have employee files and we'll stick that in there. And so that is it on the protocol manual. I think we adhered to the desires of the council that we heard the last time. If you do go over this in further detail and have any concerns or questions, just highlight those areas. You can get to me in advance and talk to me, or when we bring this up for action item at the council meeting, we can always make amendments at that point. In fact, you can amend this document at any point. You can suspend the document or the rules in the document per the guidance in the document by a majority vote at any time. So don't feel like, oh, well, we're going to have to wait till next year to make changes, because that's not necessarily the case. Any other questions or discussions on that?
I got nothing, Ron.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We did actually approve a set of Planning Commission procedural guidelines, because we never had these for the Planning Commission, and we did it under this exact same model. Planning Commission will be reviewing that at our next work session, and just going through and seeing if they feel comfortable with all that. And then that'll actually come back to council for an official adoption as well. So that is out there as well for the Planning Commission. And I think these are good. It's good to have some structure, and it's good for you to be able to go and look at those resources and to ask questions and to outline some expectations of conduct and things of that nature. So that's great. All right, I'm going to try to switch screens here, but at the same time, not mess things up too much. All right, has the vision plan appeared on your screens? Did I do that right? It has? Excellent. All right. So one of the things that we had worked on, actually, this is a couple of year great, and I know you all have this document as well. I know this has been at least through us as a policy group and a public outreach process, a couple-year process. But actually, this process started 6 years ago, back in 2015. And Oregon State University came out with a planning class, and they put together a document. We'll call it a charrette. That's basically the planning document. And it had a lot of things that were related to future planning, and it was an exercise for the class. But they did have a series of public meetings, and one of the things that they did do in the end of that document, we cite that as a resource for this document, in those public hearings, was they did this brainstorming idea about things that we needed as a community, and then they ranked those. And a lot of those ideas rolled into this document, because a lot of those ideas were consistent with the public meetings that we had. And the idea behind the vision plan is to really get everybody on the same page so that staff says, hey, these things will fall under this goal under the vision plan. So this would be something worthy for us to spend a little bit of time on and to bring forward as an idea for council. So it's meant to be really high level. Now, by approving the vision plan, council is not saying we're going to do every idea that falls under the vision plan. But what it does is it does provide some high level strategic direction, things like branding the city, policies that support, clean, livable communities, a vibrant downtown core. It's those concepts. And then we look for things that will help us achieve over time those goals. So that's kind of the vision plan, just at a high level. We outlined what that process was here. It started back in 15. And really the concepts that we ended up rolling all of these ideas, these brainstorming ideas up from were these concepts right here: livable neighborhoods, vibrant downtown and a healthy economy, excellent public facilities and infrastructure, all-inclusive events and celebrations, public art and community branding. We started to combine some of these ideas because there was continuity between them. Civic engagement and communications. I'm struggling with my more than middle-aged eyes reading this small text, so I don't know, maybe I can blow that up a little bit. There we go. That's better.
Just on that first page, Shared, I know we had talked about it briefly before, but we still need to do some proofreading on the list of names for people that we're thinking. I think Nico's in there twice.
Okay.
Some of the names where it's the word and some of them it's two names and it's the and symbol.
Okay.
So we just need to proofread through that a little better.
I'll do a little more proofreading. We did add this statement because we tried to go and eliminate some of the names unless they were on, some specific items. We just said, people participated in multiple meetings or levels of engagement and interest. They've been listed once, so if we've got them in there twice, we'll do a little more proofreading on that.
Cool.
And then we go through and we just talk about some action steps. Now, by adopting this, you're not saying, okay, we're doing these action steps necessarily. We would bring those forward to council, but some of them are conceptual. So some of them thing would be like updating the development code. Well, we actually just did that. And we did incorporate some of these visionary ideas because they were ideas that everybody was on board with. Now, there may be other development code updates that would further enhance that, and you or future council could look at those things or not. That would really be up to you. But what I will tell you is already, just since we started the planning of the vision document, there's been consistent support, and we've actually checked the box on a lot of the things that are already inside this document. That's why I just feel like it's probably time just to go ahead and approve this, at least in its current form, and then we could revisit it as we needed to. So there. Again, this is things like our downtown core. I think my comments would be real similar to that. We're actually already engaging in a number of these visionary ideas. Some of these ideas were already in our codes. We just weren't actively implementing them or enforcing them. And so some of this was just a matter of applying the current code. We didn't even change those. We talk about some concepts in here about improvements to infrastructure and meeting the needs. These are all action steps and comments that you've already set in your goals. in a lot of cases. And so it's just a matter of how do we go about it? You know, what is the best project or the best way to implement some of these things? One of the things I talked about here years ago was, matter of fact, I think Walter and I talked about this last week, on-site stormwater treatment. You know, these are things that they're already mandated by federal projects or any funding that comes from federal projects. If we were funded through SCATs, as an example, that's federal money that comes down. You already have to do this level of requirement. And so do we get ahead of that before these federal requirements spread out? And does that benefit the city with some of our current issues? Those are things we'll talk a little bit more in detail as we move through some of these planning sessions when we get to stormwater, as a matter of fact. But we've already had that forward thinking even 3 or 4 years ago, that, you know, some of these concepts we need to at least explore and look at. Whether or not we actually implement them is going to be up to you or another policy group. I think one of the things that's been consistent since my time here is how we engage the community. And we really want the community to be a cohesive community and all inclusive. How do we ensure that, you know? And a lot of that is, how do we put together these community events that promote that and promote a sense of well-being and promote a sense of quality of life. I think we've done a good job in the short period of time with the resources we've had. We've come up with a number of new events. COVID kind of stole our momentum a little bit, but I think we're doing a really good job of building and branding some really nice community events that everybody's been extremely happy with. And we can build on those, and we've got other ideas. Community events are that's the fun thing everybody likes to do, you know. And so it's nice that is a goal of the council, because it gives us a little bit of fun activity to throw in the mix of a lot of other cool stuff that we do here at the city. See, I think this page was, I went in a little too far. Now I got to go out just a bit. Oh, this was public art. I do have a presentation to talk about public art. This was something that we actually did hear consistently from folks. And so I think what that says to me is it's an important aspect. It's probably not the most important aspect of our community, but it's something the community is aware of. That there's an area here where we could be more active or more engaged. And we've got a number of examples on how we can do that as a current group. Things like, I included this little mural that's on a water tower here. That's an example of something the city could do now. This equates into dollars. And at the end of the day, it's not going to be a large percentage of a project, but it will increase the costs of a project significantly. And that will equate into either debt or increased rates to ratepayers. And so, that the council really has to set a policy on at some point, if that's the kind of things that they want to have at least brought forward during those projects for the decision making. I will tell you that even though these are expensive, I would argue that they are very high profile when they're on a large piece of infrastructure like this, and there's a lot of benefit for the community. But that doesn't mean every piece of infrastructure you would want to include an art aspect to either. But certainly a large blue tank in the middle of your city is something that you want to think, how does that look from a neighborhood, as an example, and does it blend into the surrounding area? Is there an opportunity to increase our branding ability and our visibility as a community? Does that have an economic benefit to the city. So, you want to ask yourself those questions. And then this is just, engaging our community. The Exchange Club's been a great entity. They've had a lot of success the last couple of years, even though, we've been going through COVID and a few other things. There's a core, very stable group there, and the city's been supporting that through some membership. But what they really need help doing right now, I think, is in getting more members. And so we should look for ways to help them. But I'm helping them. We did a little fundraiser as part of Corn Festival with them last year that gave them enough money to be solvent this year. If we end up doing Corn Festival the way that we did it last year again, that would be my recommendation, that we do that again. They're going to staff our Saturday market for us this year, and we do get we do get vendor money that comes into the Saturday market. And in past years, we've turned that vendor money over to the organization that would help run the Saturday market. And so we're talking to them about them running the Saturday market. So that way we don't have to take up staff time to go sit and necessarily run the Saturday market. And they can man the information booth if elected officials can't be there as part of that contract. But we're going to go to an every Saturday. And that's part of this goal right here. We're going to go to an every Saturday market throughout the summer. So there'll be 12 Saturdays. It might be 11 if we take out Corn Festival, but 11 or 12 Saturdays. And then these are just those concepts again, and everybody that participated in each of the meetings. So it's really those, however you want to count it, it's 6 to 8 concepts in the vision plan. I'm actually pretty proud of this document. We did this in-house. I've seen a lot of other vision plans, and some might be more strategic in nature about specific zone areas and things of that nature that you're trying to develop. But for bringing the community together for conceptual ideas in an era when we had a lot of division in the community, and having a document like this ready to go, I'm pretty happy with how this all turned out and how we were able to do this. So we can make some changes if you have ideas or if there's areas here of concern, but I really think this document's ready to come forward if you concur. Any comments? All right, would you guys be good with this coming forward as an action item?
I'm cool with it, Ron. Like I said, just
Yeah.
I maybe a little bit more proofreading, get a couple more pairs of eyes on it, just to, since it is something that is going to be made public, we want it to look as good as possible.
Okay, we'll definitely look at that, do that proofreading. Great.
Yeah.
All right, I've got a couple of small things that I want to throw at you, but I think we're right on schedule here. I just wanted to go over this hazard mitigation plan. As you recall, I think it was back in 2017. Can you see that spreadsheet, everybody? Okay, great. Back in 2017, we did a multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan with Marion County. Marion County Emergency Management became the lead. And this was actually a requirement of FEMA. This had to go to FEMA for review. They did make some changes to the overall plan. And what I'm showing you here is just the action items. If you want to view the full plan, it's on Marion County's website, which includes all the other jurisdictions in it, or we can get you a copy if you didn't get a copy. I think the plan's about 300 pages long, so we try not to print out multiple chunks of 300-page documents unless somebody actually needs it. But this is really the heart of the plan. And the plan talks about, the city's historical efforts, but what it does is it identifies areas and really having to do with hazards, things like floods and quakes and things of that nature, and areas where the city can improve on. And so every year, we have to update this spreadsheet. So I'm showing you the spreadsheet that we actually update to Marion County. And we send that to them, and that gets reported on the progress that we've made. In the plan, we're not required, we don't have like a set amount of time. So it isn't like the council has to achieve all these things in a 4-year period. But what we do is we identify folks who take the lead or responsible for these items, and then how do we mitigate these items? A lot of the things in the plan are not they're not necessarily project heavy. A lot of them are administrative, informational, or educational in nature. There are some projects that are in here. And I'll be honest with you, when we were going through writing this document, I was really trying to be careful of putting in large, costly projects that would then come back, and the city would have to, in addition to everything else that we're trying to work on, account for why we did or didn't do the project. But there are some meaningful things in here. So I'm going to just start with the top, and I'll go through and just let you know what these things are. And I'm just reminding council of this because one of the things sometimes we lose track of is we're doing all these projects, we're doing these goals that we have, and we're trying to align projects with the goals. And then, we're doing the day-to-day business of the city. But there's other projects out there that we're required to do that are on lists that may not necessarily be on the council's list, but they're on somebody's list. and this happens to be one of those lists. So the culvert at First and Gordon, replace that with a bridge. So what we've done is we've identified, I'm not going to scroll back and forth, but I'm just going to show you as an example. This is a more of a project. We consider that short term because we think, when we say short term, it's probably, it could be a 5 or 10 year project. It's not a long-term project. And basically what we've said is in our reporting that this will most likely happen when development occurs in that area. So the city's not going to go build a bridge on a private road and replace the culverts so that the flows are better. But when the ID zone develops and they realign the intersection, that's when that's going to be addressed. Upsize the culverts on Bishop. That's probably work that's going to somehow fit within the development of our park. Out there, we get a lot of drainage that comes from Highway 22, goes through the middle of that park. When we do a master plan project for that park, we will address how we get that stormwater that's coming off of 22 in through a culvert under Bishop Road and into Heiberger Ditch. Now, when we had development out there, we actually had that culvert on Bishop Road upsized. I actually think the developer did that. He might have even done that on his own accord just because he thought it needed done. I haven't done an analysis out there to see if that upsizing is enough. But as we do that park, we'll look at those things. But there's a clear path. There's a little stretch of property between our park property and where that culvert sits that currently is under private. It's a private piece of property. And that's something else that we'll have to look at because in order to link up that drainage from ours to Heiberger Ditch, we'll want to develop that through that private piece. Right now, what happens is the water just goes out into a field, and after it builds up to a certain point, works its way through the culvert. But anyway, there's an example. But these are all on our mitigation plan. Create an agreement for flood mitigation along with Beaver Creek, Mill Creek, Heiberger Ditch. We've done a lot of work on behalf of the city. We had that partnership with Salem, Turner, Marion County, Beaver Creek Water District. We formed a TAC. We were able to get a grant to study that stormwater retention. We brought work crews out from the sheriff's office to clean up that ditch. And we were able to have Public Works put together access easements to get into the ditch and clean a lot of that debris out. And so we'll hear more about this in stormwater, but basically what the ditch is what we would call stormwater channelization. And so what you're doing is you're creating a channel for flow. And when you start to impede that channel, you're going to get more backup in one area or another. And so we've been doing a lot of effort to keep that stormwater flowing there. Assess the seismic vulnerability of the city's reservoir. We actually had this done in 2017. I believe we completed that project of the elevated tower tank. We didn't like those numbers. And so now we're going to talk about that in our strategic planning. Where do we go from here? Been working with the city's engineer, and I think we have, at least with the information we have, I think we have a good plan forward. One of the things that we haven't done is a seismic analysis of the million-gallon reservoir. One of the difficulties that we have is we only have two reservoirs. We've got a 100,000 tower reservoir, and we got the million-gallon reservoir. And so anytime that we have to do any work on either of those tanks, we have to take the other tank offline. And one is small and really has a very short capacity as far as holding that amount of water needed for daily use. And so it's real difficult to take a million-gallon reservoir offline currently and be able to serve the community. So we've got a plan to address that. We're working with our new city engineer that we've had on board the last couple of years, and we're doing a lot of analysis on how do we make this work. Engineers, they'll put together a model through calculations that'll give you a pretty good idea if what you're thinking of will work or not. And if you know it's going to fail, then through that analysis, then obviously we don't want to do that. So that's kind of the first stage with a lot of these projects. Multi-hazard. One of the things that we've had some conversations with, one of the things I identified early on, and the reason why it's in this plan, is the city really doesn't have its own fuel storage tanks. That might be something that we look at in the future. We've got some small storage tanks out of Public Works, but if we had a seismic event like a Cascadia event, as an example, and power's out, maybe fuel isn't available for distribution widely. How do we operate? How do we get our vehicles around? How do we transport our public to safety? How do we use equipment to do any type of mitigation or excavation during some sort of an event like that if we need to? We're going to run out of fuel quickly. One of my ideas was to put together a memorandum of understanding with one of the local service stations to say, the city, by emergency action, you will always maintain X number of gallons in your tank, whether, maybe it's 500 gallons in a 10,000 gallon tank or something. And, maybe we give them a little bit of money for that, whatever it is. And that way, if there is some sort of an emergency, we can go over there. We could put manual pumps if we had to in those tanks and use that, or maybe they have emergency generation. But what we don't want them to do is sell out the last 500 gallons, so there isn't a reserve for the city. We're actually looking into purchasing tanks as a project in the future. That may be a good grant project for hazard mitigation. And then the question that you have there when you do that is, you've got to either you increase the cost of that fuel dramatically, or you've got to have a large enough tank that you can get a 10,000 gallon delivery. And then if you do that, how are you turning that over? Because that fuel will get old. And so you want to be turning it over. Well, the best way to do that is some joint use agreement. You know, maybe it's between the bus company, fire department, the city, another city. And so a lot of cities have done that. One city becomes the fuel depot type thing. That's, you know, just identify anything that we might need. You know, one of the things that we could have identified if we thought a pandemic was imminent would have been masks, right? But we didn't think a pandemic was imminent, but it's got us rethinking the list of materials that we might need. We don't have a budget for it, but that might be something that we put into the budget. We did develop a communication plan with our public works, our police, and the fire district. They have a specific channel. We have a contact list of all the key players within those departments. And so we feel like we have, at least within those 3 departments, we feel like we have a good process for communicating in some sort of a large scale event. We also did, there is a specific emergency radio that we purchased in 2017 through a grant through Marion County. And I think Marion County's got a number of those, so we can all talk on that same bandwidth. Function emergency shelters, that's something we had some discussions about. We haven't actually identified some Red Cross emergency shelters. Certainly our community center is identified as one. The fire station could be one, but I'm thinking of broader areas. You know, could the local gym double as an emergency shelter? We need to think outside the box a little bit on that.
Hey, Ron, with the multi-hazard, looking at it, you know, and I know it's not necessarily a popular topic that people want to discuss, but as far as like mass shootings and stuff like that, should look at either discussing with the fire department or the police department and having someone put on a couple of approved stop the bleed classes that are open to the public. Those are all certified through, I believe it's NAEMT now. It could be somebody else, but putting on some events like that as well. I think something that we need to consider under multi-hazard.
No, I think anything under here, we actually have include emergency preparedness in our monthly letter. We also have include that in public events and documentation. So, you know, it's broader. We can expand on that. It's not just quake, or it could be anything. We actually were just talking today, FEMA's got an online armed shooter course that's got some pretty decent information in there. We're going to do an all staff meeting and try to go through that training together. It was actually pretty good. But you're right. Those, you know, the thing about it is you prepare for an event, and that's not the event that happens. It's always something that you weren't preparing for, right? Until you don't expect it, and then it comes back around. So you really got to be thinking outside the box on a lot of these. Some of the things that are also important for us to think about with these multi-hazards is, do you have identifiable debris sites? You know, think about up the canyon now with the fires and all of the destruction up there. You know, after the fact, they went through and identified where these debris sites are going to be and how you're going to deal with this debris, and does it have any material that needs mitigated. And so one of the things that we're going to try to identify are, where are these sites located? And we do have some preliminary sites identified. So we've done a pretty good job of working through this list and checking the boxes here. We've actually done quite a little bit, but we continue to work on this, and we just want council to know that, you know, in addition to like a capital facilities plan, you know, we do have these other things, and some of these things fit underneath our goals. And that's great because we can check 2 boxes, but you know, there are these different things out there. You know, partner agency training on water conservation measures. We're actually starting to write a water conservation plan because that's part of the requirements that we're under, you know, in order to be able to deal with getting new water or moving water or using water. These are all things that come into play that are administrative rules that pop up. School seismic retrofits, we've discussed that with the school district, and I think that's one of the reasons why, at least in the middle school, that they're looking at maybe some new buildings and demoing those buildings because they've looked at that stuff. And then, of course, for us to complete the work that we need to do as far as any seismic retrofits on our facilities. One of the things that the Marion County suggested, and we did put that in there, was consider requiring new facilities to exceed minimum structural requirements. So you've got the International Building Code that outlines what the structural requirements are, but we could, as a local community, go above and beyond that, certainly. Install automatic shutoff valves in all city facilities that use natural gas. I think to some extent that's been done. I don't have a comment over there, but I know on our new building that's the case. Oh, maybe I did have a comment. Hold on. No, I didn't have a comment. We continue to do outreach to the community, and we do that at the school fairs when they have it. Of course, we haven't had one the last year and a half, but we do that through our newsletters, and usually our summer program will have stuff at an event in a park, and we'll go through that process. Develop and update flood maps. That's actually something that county has developed flood maps, and they do have those flood maps out, but we're actually looking at, as part of our UGB expansion and our buildable land inventory, about should we develop an internal flood map through our consulting for that UGB expansion, where we can identify maybe there's areas to gain some of that buildable land if we can identify it, or it is difficult to build or hard to build on. Again, I think all of that undergrounding the power lines, we do that with all new development. That's part of our current requirements. And then encourage Pacific Power to underground lines as possible, as you know, anytime they have to do stuff in the city. They don't like to do that. It's expensive. I know council as a group talked early on about maybe a project where we could fund turning Main Street into underground, you know, having everything underground along Main Street. There's a cost to that. There's actually an ORS that outlines a process where that can be approved, where the power company will, they'll go out and secure debt. They'll come up with engineers' costs. The city approves it, and then there's an assessment on all the users in the community. And I think Escacada underground all their Main Street lines. And of course they did a lot more than what we would need to do. And it wasn't that expensive. It was like $1 a month on everybody's utility bill, or $1.25, something like that. So Pacific Power thought that would be a relatively low, but you know, we just threw that out there for council. We never pulled the trigger on it. You know, nobody is excited about increasing anybody's utility bills. So we didn't do that, but it's an option, and it's out there for us if we so decided to.
Well, and with that, Ron, I know from the wildfires and everything, there was already discussion that a lot of the federal dollars coming in as far as rebuilding some of the damage, that for cities to be eligible for federal funds, they may have to require that power lines be put underground now. So that may be something that we can kind of keep our finger on the pulse with it. and see if some of that, FEMA money or whatever's floating around, it would be applicable to us as well, since we are kind of the gateway to the canyon, and
Yeah.
see if that might either offset the cost or potentially even pay for the whole thing for at least Main Street or some other areas to get those power lines underground.
Yeah. And if it's just for council's information, if it's just like a connection to the line, to the main line, like as an example, the new fuel station, even though that was an existing store, they had to underground their power over to that. So they had to take out all the overhead power there that ran over to the store and underground it. And that was part of our development code requirement. But that's, and you can do that to stores or businesses when they come in and redevelop, especially if they go through a land use action, it's fairly easy to do. But the main line is still there, and that main line is something that if we want to underground, all of our residential areas are now underground. That's part of our code. So a lot of our city is underground at this point, and any future development has to be underground. All right. Do we need a break? I know I've been talking for an hour and a half now almost. So does anybody want to get up and walk around? Do we want to take 5 minutes, or do you want me to just keep plowing through it?
I mean, I've been moseying all over my house anyway. I just got the volume turned up wrong.
All right. I'm not
Good.
I don't really have a screen. I can see a kind of a small picture window of everybody, but I've got my main screen on. So I'll keep going. Feel free to get up and walk around if that's what you need to do. So I've got a number of things here, but what I thought we would do is we would go through the goals as a preliminary view. We have 5 goals, and then there's some objectives underneath those goals. And what I wanted to do is give the council the opportunity to revisit these goals visually. I've made a couple of suggested edits because some of the goals now have transformed into other projects. And then we can come back if council desires, and we can take one more look at these after we're done with the series of retreats, and then decide if we want to add or alter any of these goals based on that discussion. But I think it's healthy if we just revisit those. Are you okay with doing that? I see 2, 3 heads shaking, so I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
All right. Now, can everybody see my screen that looks like a PowerPoint presentation? Everybody see that? Okay.
I can see Ron.
You can see it, Mayor?
Yeah,
Mayor,
we're good.
I don't have you on the screen because I can only see 4 windows, but I know you're vocal. You'll let me know.
That's probably a good thing because I'm not wearing pants.
All right. Okay, so these were our goals from last year. I think we did not have a retreat, but what we did come to a council meeting, and we did look at these and say, yeah, we thought these were still good. And so there's numbers after these goals, and number 1 means try to do that as soon as possible. If it's got a number 2, try to accomplish in like a 2 to 3 year period into the future. 3, nice to have, but we understand that that's probably an ongoing, it'll probably take a while to do that. We say 3 to 5 years, but realistically, if some of those could be 10 or 15 year projects. It's hard to put a goal on there that might be that far out into the future though. So, and then 4 is usually routine or ongoing. Oftentimes what I'll do is put a 1 through 4. It means I'm working on it right away, but it's probably an ongoing effort. And so that's just a little key for you to keep in mind for a priority of the goals. And so our goal number 1 is to provide and maintain municipal facilities and infrastructure to support current operations and growth. Obviously, we have a lot of discussions about city infrastructure and the needs that we have. And I understand we have a lot of needs. Would have been nice for us to have gotten some of these projects done before now, but just keep in mind that this is the case in every city. You never reach the goal line. Once you start, once you get all your infrastructure replaced over a period of time, then that first set of projects you had are probably out of their usable life shelf, and you're kind of starting all over again. It shouldn't weigh heavy on the city that we have these insurmountable number of public infrastructure projects, because our city and every other city is always going to have a number of insurmountable infrastructure projects. But one of the things that I changed here, and I put it in red, is the word determine. And so what under that goal, we had these 4 objectives, and it was implement, or it was determine needed water and sewer repairs, maintenance and modifications, and develop priorities for implementing. We understand, based on our current capital facilities plans, what the 1 to 20 year water and sewer needs are. We're revisiting those capital facilities plans because there's been some new requirements that have been put onto us from EPA down through DEQ related to sewer. But what we really do is we're really analyzing those projects for what now is the most urgent, right? And a project that may have been, at least in the city's mind, the most urgent 5 years ago may not be the same priority list today. And so we want to constantly be analyzing that. But I really think over the next 2 years, we're going to be implementing a lot of these. So we're always going to be determining what these needs are through revisiting our capital facilities plans. But really what we need to do is implement needed water and sewer repairs, maintenance and modifications, and continue to develop priorities for implementing. So in my mind, what I would do is strike the word determine and include the word implement. And that was my suggestion here. Again, 1.2 said develop needed road system repairs, maintenances and modifications, develop priorities and implement a plan. And I simply think we just implement. Now we're into the phase where we can do a few projects, we should implement them. We're going to constantly be developing new priorities and projects through updating our capital facilities plans. And so we really need to move into that action. Increase pedestrian safety through fill in the gap projects. These are sidewalk projects, crosswalk projects, and other forms of mobility. I think that's still a great goal for the city. We've had some success in that area as well. Resolve viability of acquiring Marion County public works facilities. And our goal 1.4 used to say evaluate the need and viability of acquiring. I think we're in an action state. There's been a lot of back and forth with Marion County about the old Marion County Public Works facility. The mayor and I have both reached out to commissioners. I've been a couple of years in conversations with the director of Public Works, and it just seems like it's not a priority. There's something that's not working. If the goal of our agencies, if our agency goal is to acquire this facility and Marion County's goal was to give us the facility, we're not doing a very good job of meeting those goals. So somewhere there's a breakdown, and so I think out of frustration, we finally reached out to some of the electeds and said, listen, if you're interested, we'd love to have that property. We'll make good use of it. If you're not interested, let us know because we'll take it out of our goal list. You know, if Marion County has no desire for the city to own that property, then we don't, there's no more to discuss there, right? And so that's goal number one. Now, what I did was I went ahead and I put some just food for thought of things that some of these things we've already talked about, some of these things we will talk about, but these are objectives that they could be objectives under goal number one, or they could just be projects that we're working on. They don't have to be objectives. But the public works shop building, we talked to council about that last year. You know, one of the things I did was kind of a reevaluation of city operations, and I systematically went through the city. And I just think we really need a plan on how we meet the future needs of this community related to our public works operation. It is a huge part of the work that the city does. And we're ineffective based on the level of investment that we have made in that facility down there. And so, you know, we're going to have to put in a water treatment facility that's going to be located on the same piece of property. But we really need to get some sort of enclosed building because a lot of our equipment is deteriorating faster than it really needs to. And that's because it's kind of exposed. And I don't like to talk about it at an open meeting, but really a lot of our stuff is exposed. I mean, people could literally cut the fence and walk in there and take whatever they want. So there's not good security. We have security cameras and things like that, but a lot of the stuff's just not locked. We worked on this last year before. We came up with some prices and we thought we had a project, and then went to our engineer. You know, the cities as a jurisdiction, you have to go through certain bid processes, and things have to be engineered, and everybody's got to put their stamp on it. If they don't, then it increases the liability of the city. As we went through that analysis, it really increased the price of this project, and it made it almost unattainable. But I've been working with our city engineer. We're going to do some initial analysis out at the Public Works facility, and we think we have a plan to move the shop forward. And before we finish these sessions, this should be back on your topic list to either reject or approve. So wastewater treatment facility and rates, obviously, one of the things that you know, you're going to have to think about is we know we have to do some sort of improvements. We already know that. We already know that those are going to cost a lot of money. And we already know that's going to increase rates to the community. One of the things that is suggested by our engineering firm is that we really need to start raising some of those rates now. So when we get to pull the trigger in 2 years, that lowers that hit to the community. Because as we work through this treatment facility project, it's millions of dollars. Now, the question is, as we sit here today, because the plan's not completed, is it $6 million or $16 million? That's the question, but it's millions of dollars. And we have an MOA with DEQ that says at the end of 7 years, this project has to be completed. Well, we've used 2 of those years, so we've got 5 years left. And it takes 2 years to construct a facility, right? It takes a year to design and bid a facility, a year to a year and a half. So if you work backwards, we have to have funding in place in 18 months, full funding. Now, the timing of that is going to change a little bit because we can't finish the facilities plan until the permit is written, our discharge permit through DEQ. And because of COVID, they got behind like everybody else, right? And so they're now writing that permit. Now, we've been in negotiations with them because everything that we can do to make that permit requirement less equals dollars at the end of the stream. So for us as staff, we're trying to push this project closer to a $6 million project instead of the $16 million project. But have no doubts that we will have a project, and it's going to come quickly. Typically, I wouldn't want to bring council to the level of boring you with all the technical process of how a treatment plant operates, but that's probably our next meeting. And it's it's just a lot of detail about how all that stuff works. And typically I wouldn't do that, but in the case of where we are right now, we really got to start engaging the public on this issue. And so I just feel like we need all hands on deck, and everybody needs to understand the problem to some extent in detail in order to be able to do that. So that's what we're going to go through in the next meeting next Tuesday. Whether or not you guys do that, that's a policy issue, and you'll have to make that determination. But those are some of the recommendations. Emergency generator for the 1 million gallon reservoir, water rights, new well. To some extent, you've already approved some of this work, at least some of the analysis with the water rights, the new reservoir, the 1 million gallon generator. We're doing all the engineering and cost analysis to bring the projects back to you right now for all those things. So those will be projects. Stormwater I&I, you've heard me talk about this. We'll get more in detail in a later presentation. I'm excited about these things because I've done these projects before, and I really have seen the benefit of doing some of these projects, and they're hard. They're difficult decisions to make. There's a lot of technical information with them, and oftentimes people don't really understand stormwater and I&I and things of that nature. But I've seen the benefit. I get really excited about these because I see a lot of these projects within our reach. And in a lot of cases, I've got plans to where a lot of these things can occur without an increased rate to the customer or to the ratepayer. There will be some projects that we just will have to turn into some sort of an increased rate, but we don't have to. All of them don't have to be that. Some of them can be done without that. Streets, capital facilities plan, Delmar extension on 11th. Those are things that we're going to bring forward in some of those projects. So again, we're going to revisit this at the end, but I think you're going to hear a menu of things that can just fall right under goal 1. They can be an objective, but they don't have to be an objective. They can still meet the intent of goal 1. I've got to move my little window here in order to find out, what did that say? Oh, East Side Park Master Plan. Yep. I've got a plan to fund that, and that's in a presentation for consideration. But we're getting some rates. What I'd like to do with that is I'd like to have our engineering company. It sounds like we're tasking our engineering company with a lot of work, and we actually are. But I want to have them. They're out getting some estimates to put together a capital facilities plan for that park master plan. The reason why I've included them is some of my ideas for our strategic direction is to use that facility to put in a new 1 million gallon reservoir, 1.5 million gallon reservoir. We've already got the property. We own the property. We can easily put it in a piece of that property. And if we included an arts project with that, where we painted it to fit within the schematics or the plan of the park, it blends right in. Under one of the contracts that we already approved, where we're looking at water rights and we're doing some community-wide analysis, one of the things we're looking at is well depths in that area of the park, because one of the other things that we've struggled with is drilling a well and having a long-term production capacity out of it. And so one of the things we're doing is we're looking at the historical pump records in that area, the depth, the yield, because we could sink a well right next to the reservoir, and have it all inclusive. And it's already property we own, and it can blend within the other activities that we've got planned out there. So we're doing that analysis. Goal 2, support and encourage community involvement, create a sense of community. These are all things that we've had under our objective. Let me move this real quick. Reach consensus and adopt the overall identity and vision. I've highlighted this because if we approve our vision plan, I think we've done this. I think we've met this objective, and it really doesn't need to stay on there. Explore ways to encourage and maintenance and use and resale and upgrade of commercial corridor. I think we've done this. I think we're doing this through our code updates and our new processes. Maybe we continue, but if you look at downtown today versus where it was just a couple of years ago, there's a dramatic increase. And with that increase in visibility. And with that increase in visibility, now we're getting more and more context for reinvestment. Maybe in another presentation, I'll go in a little bit more detail on things that I can elaborate with the council, but I will tell you that right now, this year and next year will be the highest growth rate we've seen from projects. We've just got a slew of projects that are either already approved or have done pre-planning and are coming in. There's a number of projects that came in and did pre-planning and then executed purchases. Well, those executed purchases are going to turn into some sort of upgraded project, or they wouldn't have pulled the trigger on the purchase. And so we're going to see quite a little bit of growth. And you would think in a year with COVID that we would see less investment, but it's actually been opposite. I think this has been a huge investment year. We continue to advocate for effective transit. I continue to do that. It can be time consuming. I think I had 2 4 or 5 hour meetings with CARTS and awarding grants, but the award of those grants maintain service in rural Marion County, and that's what we're trying to do. And so those have been great little projects. Identify public health issues. I think that's I think that's something we continue to put on there. Continue to improve the vision for the community through events and celebrations, including purpose and responsibility. That's something once council identified what the objective of events were, and they came up with a criteria. We try to make sure that our events meet that criteria. And why are we doing these? And so we do that. Obtain a larger community center. I really think that's one of those. I really think that's one of those projects that we'll see at the new park facility. And then our community service group, we continue to work with and encourage the Exchange Club. Community arts projects, branding across the city, equipment and facilities. We've branded with our new logo, our documents and our website, clothing and different things like that as we order new stuff. We need to go back and brand our equipment and our vehicles, meaning putting our new logo and things like that on there. Do we include an entry sign? These are just ideas. It's not necessarily something that we pull the trigger on. Accessible park equipment. You kind of already indicated that you wanted us to go out and get costs, and we've done that. We've got a project to bring back to council. So some of these things are going to materialize before we even finish this planning session. But that's efficiency. That's what we want to do. If you know that's the direction you want to go, let's pull the trigger and get those things done. New park development, a dog park. Again, we're out securing the estimates for the for what we need to do there. But these are projects, you know, once we approve the dog park through a project, which you've already indicated to us, you want us to move forward on that at the last council meeting. You know, that thing could be done in less than a month, most likely. I heard from the fencing folks today, and they basically said, apparently the cost of steel is on the rise. And it's one of those things where it's like doubling every 3 days or something. And they're like, we'll give you an estimate for the fencing for this park, but you know, it's only good for 10 days. So, you know, because we're not going to extend ourselves any longer than that. And so if that's the case and we accept one of these bids, obviously, you know, that park's going to materialize quick, right? Community center kitchen upgrades, our virtual events that we're doing, continue to support our volunteer group, the Cascade Youth Council. I've done a couple of virtual class attendances where I've given lectures to the classes. They were planning to move into full or at least a hybrid in-person attendance. And so they started a new session after the first of the year. And I think the teacher that I was working, or the 2 or 3 teachers I was working from or working with, wanted to get that done. That was delayed. That hybrid start was delayed, I think, until towards the end of the month because of some state requirements. So, but we'll re-engage those folks. I'm going tomorrow to do a tour of the high school's manufacturing and metal shop and woodworking shop facilities. And again, it's to further connect that relationship and see if there's projects that we can do. So tomorrow I'll be out talking to those teachers about the different projects that we have and where there's partnerships. And then continue to enhance our community events. Does anybody need a break? I just included this because one of the things I heard early on is I can get talking and sometimes I need to just make sure people need a break. Nope. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I'll go through these a little faster because I see we're running out of time. Goal 3 is to, let me read it here. I'm going to move my, create an environment to attract, retain, and grow businesses. I think you see it. I think we've done that through the implementation of our ordinances. We've done it through streamlining some of our processes that reduces cost and time for those businesses. And then I think we've done it through adhering to those standards that are in our codes, being a little more consistent with applying those standards, because now what you see is you see a reinvestment happening, right? You saw a couple of businesses, the vet clinic, the dentist's office, they improved their look and feel. Then, pretty soon Newfields comes along and they're going to do a remodel and they want to improve their look and feel. And so you start to see this reinvestment that occurs throughout the city. And then when you have these places that aren't developed and people come in and they want to purchase those, you see that desire to come in and purchase some of those areas because they see it as a valuable place to invest their capital and their business efforts. And so I will just tell you that there is a lot of activity around our business core. So develop a plan to expand our UGB. We're working on that right now. The state's process for UGB expansion is complex and complicated, and it's not inexpensive. And one of the difficult things we've found is a consultant to help us go through that process. And we found some consultants, but they're quite expensive. And so we're trying to do our due diligence there. I'm still working on that, but we do have options to move that forward. Mitigate infrastructure demands on ID zone. We're going to have a whole conversation about that at a future meeting. High-speed fiber and internet for the city. We think of something like that. We think of broadband projects that come through and you know, they blanket the entire city. We have high-speed fiber throughout the city. And there's multiple vendors that have that. But I think the infrastructure is inconsistent. It's not consistent across the city, and I believe that that's where the council was intending with that objective. And then review ordinances, practices to ensure consistency with the goals of attracting and retaining businesses. We just went through that exercise last year. I think that's always an ongoing thing. I don't have a specific goal that we would add to this. I think the high level goal is good. If council has an objective that they want to see added, we could certainly add or change that. And then these are just some things that I put here that would fit under this goal that are big projects for this year. The expanding the Saturday market, the tiny village project, assisting the downtown development. You know, we did that large landscaping project downtown, really had an impact on First and Mill Creek. And then across the street where the grocery store was redeveloping, we actually paid for a portion of that landscape because that was part of our original project, the street trees portion. And then the next phase of that we would like to do is to get a project with the post office. They're a federal agency, and you know, I don't know, they don't really budget a lot for landscaping care and maintenance, so it may be something the city ends up doing. But you've got a really nice area of landscaped, and then you've got kind of this little weed patch, and then you've got an area of landscape. So if that's what we have to do to have continuity, that's fine with me. Adopting our vision plan, we've already talked about that. And then ID zone updates. So one of the things that I'm trying to figure out that's an option for council to consider for the ID zone is right now in the downtown corridor, we allow a commercial development on the ground level and apartment development on the upper levels. Well, there's really not a lot of large parcels in the commercial corridor. And so we don't really see a lot of that kind of development. And when we do, it's not modern development like you might see at, you know, Lake Oswego or someplace like that, where you've got an urban village style development. But the ID zone is one of those areas that we could see that. And the benefit is, one of the difficulties that we've ran into with that ID zone is it doesn't pencil out. There's a lot of offsite improvements that are required, and straight commercial development, straight industrial development. It hasn't really penciled out for somebody to take that risk and make that investment. But if you add a layer of residential development on top of that commercial development, then that does go a long way to helping to pencil out. And we don't allow it because DLCD at the time wanted that to really be, they were really focused on industrial style development. Even though we've kind of over time manipulated the zone so that it pushes it more towards the commercial side. That was kind of the original allowance for that property to be brought into the city, was really that industrial style development. And so we're working with them right now because their priorities may have changed a little bit, right? With all of the housing shortages that are going on in the state. The difficulty that we have in how we would piece that together is we'd have to make sure that our code was written in such a way that you couldn't have, you know, an industrial use underneath a residential use, right? We wouldn't want to have a welding shop with apartments on top or something like that. We want to make sure it's a retail store with apartments on top, or, you know, some sort of business that's more clean activity. So, but those are ideas that we're working on. Council said, how can we make this pencil out? That is a way that would go along. That is an action we could take if DLCD approved it. That could go a long ways to getting a commercial development into that area. So anyway, and there's more ideas that we'll talk about as project specific for that. So determine where the city assets are in for needs in case of emergency. We've already done this objective, and what I've changed that to is track. We should continue to track where those assets are. And what we did was we developed an asset list from the city, from the fire district, and from the school district. Things that could be used in the event of an emergency. And that might be anything from hoses and pumps to, vehicles, buses, whatever. Continue to send out that emergency preparedness information to our citizens. We're constantly doing that. Continue to evaluate public safety measures and make recommendations. We're continuing to do that. So that's we do a lot of that throughout the year. We were just talking about, doing an on-site shooter preparedness, but everything that we've done this year really fits with that. All of our COVID response was really geared towards making sure our citizens were safe. And so some of the other things, the emergency generator that's on our list, continued support through coronavirus, increased preparedness and communications, continue to do all that. Water and sewer needs should be met. And that's things like we're having some issues with capacity, ability of our system to be able to handle certain capacity events. We need to be able to mitigate those, and we are working on those through our plans. Implement mitigation plans approved through FEMA. We went over that earlier. We've got that checklist that we keep going through and implementing. And then our seismic analysis of the Tower Reservoir. So one of the things that's going to come to council for approval as this menu of projects is a new seismic analysis of the Tower well empty. Our engineer thinks that that we've ran that through by them, and they think that for the investment of that seismic analysis, that idea has a huge benefit in cost savings for the city. So it's worth investing whatever the cost of that analysis is. Usually they're between $10,000 and $20,000. But if we end up understanding that we don't need $1.2 million worth of improvements if we empty 100,000 gallon tank, that's $20,000 is worth that investment. So those will be on our list. Goal 5, provide city services are responsive to citizens and demonstrate good stewardship. And really that's in everything that we do. It's that example of, a few years ago, our approach for the Tower well was just do a seismic analysis and then set that as a project. Well, we did that seismic analysis and it said $1.2 million. Now we could have just as easily put that under one of our projects, infrastructure projects, as a $1.2 million project. And it would have escalated over time, right, until we did it. But what we did was we said, no, let's reassess that. Let's do another analysis and see where that would be empty. It's only 100,000 gallon reservoir. And we already know on our project list that we've got 1 million to 1.5 million gallon reservoir that we have to build. If we can combine those into 2 projects, if we can mitigate the seismic concern of one, and we could build the other, and we could do it all for the same price as one project, isn't that being responsive and demonstrating good stewardship? It is. But also listening to the community on things that they want demonstrates good stewardship and is responsive. So under that goal, it has a wide range. Leverage means of communication that's effective. We've been really stepping that up the last year. Continuing to maintain a financial plan. We do that through that forecast model. We met that goal and we continue to meet that goal through our forecast model. we can look out into the future, and so far it's been pretty consistent. And we can see what things look like, what decisions we make real time, and how that might look 3 years from now or 5 years from now. And everything we do really is all centered around the financial stability of the community and being good stewards of the public money. Improve City Hall computer system. That was our first objective. I changed this from a 1 through 4 and ongoing, because I just say we need to maintain improve City Hall computer system. And that's not just computers and licenses, but it's software packages, it's firewalls, it's security programs that we get. It's all of those things that maintain a safe environment. I know Nico sent me an email today about a city being hacked. Now, you know what? On the scale of cities, we're not highly protected. You know, I mean, if somebody was a terrorist and they had the expertise, they're probably going to figure it out with a city our size. But we're a heck of a lot more prepared and secure than we were just a couple of years ago. And we continue to look for things and watch for things that make us prepared. Last year, we signed up on a software that it's kind of a live software that analyzes everything coming into the city, and it tries to notify you if there's spyware, things of that nature. And it's a package that a lot of cities are using. But we continue to look at that. I'm going to go through this a little quicker because we're running out of time. Informational videos, continue to enhance our platforms. Oh, I think we did all that. So that's kind of the end of that presentation, but that's our 5 goals. And you know, you guys have these in your handbooks there. But at the end of the day, I think the high level goals are the critical ones, less so the objectives. Whether we initiate a project or we put it on as an objective, that's really up to you, but it's really those 5 high level goals. And if there's another goal that you as a group, or goals that you as a group really think the city would benefit from, we should have that discussion and try to see if we can work that consensus to include that. So I see that we are at 8:18. I told you guys 2 to 3 hours. I had other talking points, but just from an informational standpoint, I want to recap where we are right now. We are going to move the protocol manual forward for an action item, and we are going to move the vision plan forward for an action item. Those were the 2 action items I recall from this. Did I get that correctly from council?
Yeah, going back through it, there is one other thing I wanted to talk about with the protocol manual, but I'll let you finish first.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that as a group, or is it just a notation for me to make a correction? Or
well, it goes back to the previous little hiccup we had as far as written correspondence when it's presented to council and submitting stuff to council packets and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So where is it? I think it was 10.5.
Okay, and you know, that was written before we actually had that situation, so our policy may have changed a little bit.
And the policy that, or at least what's in the manual, 10.5, which says interested parties or their authorized representative may address the council anytime by written communication in regard to any matter concerning the city's business or over which the council has control. Such communication may be direct mail or given to the city administrator for copies to be distributed to the council members. And I think that the previous conversation that we had in regards to the public safety fee and the marijuana moratorium was that if written correspondence was related to a specific agenda item, that we wanted that written correspondence put in the packet for all the counselors to see. And then there was the one day that there was the complaint that kind of popped up at the end, and the letter had specifically asked for it to be read at council.
Yeah.
The conversation we had after the fact was that that's probably something that should have been submitted to the council packets and then addressed at the next meeting. So I just want to make sure when it comes to written communications, we have a little bit more guidance, a little bit more clarification about written communication being made available to all counselors if it is going to be addressed at a meeting.
So here's where we landed on that. I can go through there and do a little bit of language update. Our intent from a staff level is always to give all the council the same information. So oftentimes you will see I will respond to an inquiry from one council member, but oftentimes, even though that person inquired, I'll send it out to everybody. And so that's our intent. My concern with that correspondence is normally when we get correspondence or we think of council correspondence, how it comes into the city is dear city council, to city council, or city council, something of that nature. And so to me, that is a piece of mail that goes to the entire council. What caused a little bit of a hiccup in this particular situation was it was addressed to a particular member. And internally, the policy that I've, after speaking and consulting with the city attorney, there was a number of things that were raised from that whole situation. And some of it having to do with just the flow of public mail. So where we landed is if something comes addressed to a particular council member, something comes in and it's just got, let's say, Walter's name on it. Staff is no longer opening that piece of mail because it's not addressed to the city and it's not addressed to the council. It's addressed to Walter. And then it's up to Walter to open that piece of mail and then to determine if that needs to come back to me or staff for distribution or if he brings that up. And so we're no longer opening mail that's addressed to an individual council member. And that was really one of the things that whole situation highlighted to me. Now, if somebody says, I want this brought up at a council meeting, or I want this given to the council, and they just hand it to us, or it's addressed to you, then those are the pieces that will go to you. My preference is that rather than to put that into a council packet, which becomes an official record, the process that I started last year was to email those documents to you as a group. Now they're still available as part of the Freedoms of Information Act. If somebody gives correspondence to the council, anybody can request that if they want it. But we had a lot of mail that made accusations against certain council members that honestly were not founded necessarily, or maybe they were founded but really wasn't of public interest. As elected officials, if you irritate or upset a particular person in the community, that's up to you, but that may not necessarily be city business. And so I'm not sure that from a policy standpoint, I think that that's fair to put into as a policy position, to have somebody send a letter that levels negative things against an individual on the council and immediately put that into a council packet and in the public record. I think my preference would be if council agrees, but this will be up to you as a policy standpoint. I think my preference would be that we scan that document and we email it to everybody. And then it would be up to you as a group whether you're going to address it and in what forum. In my opinion, if somebody says, this council member did this and this council member did that, and violates the protocol manual and it violates their rules of conduct. I think it's up to the council to say, okay, we've received correspondence, and I think we need to act on it without talking about the nature of the correspondence necessarily or the specifics, and say, it's something we all received this letter that leveled these accusations. We need to schedule an executive session to discuss the details, and then if there's an action to be taken from there, rather than just going to a council meeting and talking about.
Hey, Ron.
I don't think that's what exactly Derek was asking.
Okay.
I think that you kind of overcomplicating it a bit. As far as the procedural guidelines for us go, I would just like to see it spelled out a little more in our guidelines that, for example, if I get a letter addressed to me specifically that says, going back to the previous, Nico doesn't actually live in Aumsville, right? As a member of the council, I don't think it needs to go to the whole council to decide whether we're going to address it or not. I think because it was addressed to me, I have the right to bring it up to the council. However, if I choose to bring it up to the council, then that should be submitted to the packet for everyone to see beforehand, right?
Yes, I agree.
That's all I'm getting at as a procedural note.
Okay.
As far as doing executive sessions and all that kind of stuff, that's a rabbit hole on a number of different things that could happen.
Yeah.
But the way it's written in the procedural guidelines, there really is no clarification. And what had happened in the example that I'm addressing, there was a complaint against me, and it was in a letter that was addressed to Della. The letter asked for her to read it. I don't fault her for reading it in any way. However, we do have an agreement of no surprises.
Yeah.
I think that the better procedural way of handling that would have been that gets submitted into the packet to be addressed at the next meeting so that there are no surprises occurring.
Would you be okay if I just did a slight rewording of that says, under our no surprise rule, written communication that's addressed specifically to you, if that's going to be discussed at a council meeting, that needs to be distributed to the whole council in advance of the meeting, and simply leave it at that, because
that's exactly what I'm asking for.
Yeah. My concern is there's some of those correspondence, I'm not sure that I'd want to put it in the packet unless council wanted it. I think that would be something that the council could say if they were going to bring it up and talk about it in detail at an open meeting, then they could say, for the record, can we include this correspondence in the packet?
If I get a letter that says, hey, I think Doug's a jerk, that doesn't need to be addressed at council. I don't care. If I get a letter that says, I think Doug specifically did A, B, and C, and here are my concerns, and it's a well thought out argument that needs to be addressed at council, then yes, we'll go ahead and address that at council. But that gets submitted to the packet first. I'm not dropping any bombs on Doug, and he also gets to see the accusations that are being made and potentially have the ability to provide some clarification.
Well, and my only caveat is I would prefer to send that through an email, joint email to all the council members, not in the packet, and then it would be up to you to decide if it needed to go into the packet. That would be my only change. That would be my only preference.
I think that if I had something that I received, sorry, I'm over here in the corner. I think that if I received something and I had the intentions of, even if it was addressed to me, right, and I had the intentions of bringing it to the council, I would expect to have a procedure in place for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the minimum that's
Okay.
me.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily agree with it being submitted to the entire council for approval to be put on the agenda, because then you can run into a situation where, if there's little clicks or whatever, and people are or individual biases, there may be legitimate items that need to be addressed that aren't being addressed. I think if anybody on the council receives a letter that specifically asks, hey, address this at a council meeting, then it is their prerogative to determine, is this a legitimate concern, or is this something that I don't feel needs to be addressed? And if it is a legitimate concern, then we will go ahead and address it. It doesn't need to go to the council for everybody to give the thumbs up on us addressing it.
Well, and there's another aspect of that I think is important, just from a standpoint of how we work. First of all, I would hope that if one council member received something that said, you know, this second council member did something wrong, or was a jerk, or, you know, was mean to me, or did all these things. The first protocol based on our protocol manual is you should contact that council member and talk to them about it, rather than, you know, bringing it up as a group. So if I'm a council member and I get something that says, you know, negative things about, you know, Doug, the first thing I'm going to do is call Doug and say, hey, you know, I got this letter from a concerned citizen and they said these things. What's your side of the story? Because that could be the mitigating determination of if you do anything with it. So I would hope that would be the first action. But the second thing is you know, there is some liability in us representing a third party. So, you know, council member one hears something from somebody, and in this particular case, I don't think we've these cases that we heard, I don't think crossed that line, but I'm just trying to think of broader than what we've already experienced. But council member one got a letter from X that, you know, made an allegation, and asked for that to be brought up at the council meeting. Number one, you're not obligated just because somebody asks you, as a representative of the community, to bring something forward. You have to go through a due diligence period, and, you know, those should be maybe vetted with staff and different things like that, to find out, is there a process that would be best handled? And then number two, I don't think talking about potential faults, whether that's a political fault or it's a perceived crime or wrongdoing, without that person having the ability to decide if it's okay to talk about this in public, or if it needs to be an executive session, is a good policy in of itself. So I know, Mayor, you know, you're very open, and you're okay with talking about some of that stuff in public, but not everybody wants to make that determination on the face. And I think you have to have that conversation. So even if I again, it's back to putting it into an agenda packet without having that conversation first. I think there needs to be something in between there. And I don't think anything that we've done so far as a group, first of all, I think we're much more cohesive today, and it just seems to get better and better. So hopefully we're not headed back in that direction, but I would just think as a group, we'd want to have some process where that's not vetted in you know, in an open venue without some due diligence first, I guess. But I'll come up with some language, and you guys can get it in advance. And if you don't like it, you can wordsmith it, suggest it.
I think we're on the same page here, Ron, and I'm fine with, you know, purposely leaving it a little bit vague so that it gives us some playroom as far as our processes. I would just like to see that specific piece fleshed out a little bit more, so that we don't run into a situation like that again.
Yeah, and that particular situation, you know, I'll take some responsibility for that. It was just, you know, everything that was going on, I didn't really catch the little nuances. I did not read that letter. Staff opened it and we put it in the council member's box. I did not realize that was something I didn't realize it was asked to be brought up in a public meeting. You know, because at that time I kind of changed the policy, and what my policy is if I get something that's addressed to the council, or a negative letter or an accusation of misdeeds or misdoing, I'm going to email that out to the entire council, not in a packet, but just in an email, and say, here's correspondence from a member of the community. So if I get something that says, give this to the council, that's how I'm doing it. I'm not doing it necessarily in a packet, because we saw a series of these emails, and some of them were very articulate, and there were some facts that were associated with
Some a little bit less so.
some a little bit less so. And to me, I was real uncomfortable about putting those into a packet that would be distributed and available to everybody online without at least council having a first look at those and saying these need to be part of the official record, or they shouldn't be part of the official record, because there is.
Have any hard feelings with anybody about that letter being read? You were doing your job to the best of your knowledge, and Della did what a community member asked by reading the letter. If I got butthurt by.
Yeah, and I know Della well enough over the last few years that honestly she was just doing what she thought the community member wanted. I believe wholeheartedly that was just a process error, probably as much on my part as anybody else's. But yeah, I got where you're going on that. I can make those changes. So I've got 3 changes: 9.2. Public information officer, and 10.05. I'll make a couple of tweaks to those, and then that'll come before you at a meeting. So we've got about 22 minutes. I mean, obviously we could go longer. I want to make sure that I'm being respectful of your time. And really this was to set up a series of decision points that are going to start to follow in these future meetings. But and we can set more time in the future, but I do want to take the next 20 minutes to see, are there any council initiatives, burning issues in the general group that you would like us to work on as part of this series of our retreats for the council's consideration?
Like you and I had previously talked about, Ron, during these retreat meetings, just so everybody's aware, I specifically asked Ron that during one of these meetings to present us with some options as far as the water bill goes, whether it's changing the tiers, whether it's a price per gallon, sticking with what we got. But that has been a hot topic amongst the community for quite some time. And at the very least, we have to do our due diligence by addressing it in an official capacity. And that may be us determining, hey, we've got to stick with what we got, but it deserves to be an item that we discuss at the very least, so that we can tell the community, hey, we did have this conversation.
And we did a presentation at a retreat with that, and I think there was only 4 or 5 members of the council that were able to make that. And they kind of did come to consensus, at least amongst that group. But of course, our group has changed. So I think it's good to take a fresh look at it. I still have that same presentation. I think it's just going to really need to be a good, consistent messaging. And we'll have to have a conversation about messaging if we decide to go one way or the other with a different rate structure. But we do have an internal analysis, and really just at a high level, and we can go through it. It would mean that we would eliminate the senior discount rate, but they would fall into most likely a lower user rate. And so by default, they would be in this discounted category. It just wouldn't be called out as senior discounts. It would just be in the lower tier of rate users. And then they would get a lower rate, but then those folks that used more would see an increase. And I think we just need to talk about it as being, if we did go in that direction, as being a fair way to to bill the water usage. So it's a consumption base. If you use more, you pay more. If you use less, you pay less. And not necessarily, we got to be careful with lowering rates because we're going to see that utility bill increase, right? Because of the sewer project. And I wouldn't want the community to feel like, oh, they lowered the rates $5, but then they turned around and raised them $40 the next year. And the messaging behind that, I think we just need to think about. But there is some advantage to going to a user base system, and we can do that. Our software has that ability. We just have to kind of determine where are those points that we're going to plug in and what does that look like. So we've got some examples of what that would look like, but basically it becomes a community-wide system. Now, here's the good part about moving. There's some advantages to moving to a system like that. One of the advantages is natural conservation. And one of the things that we really need to implement according to the state and according to basically where we're going into the future is internal conservation of potable water. And so you will get some of that just based on the fact that it gets more expensive to use more. There are disadvantages to that. And that is right now you've kind of got this, we're all in it together. We all kind of subsidize each other a little bit. So when I'm using more, I'm not really paying for it because my neighbor's prepaying for a little bit. And then when they're using more and I'm not, they're getting the basis of that kind of community-wide subsidy. That's kind of how it's working now. But we do have that analysis and I have it on an agenda.
Cool. Thank you, Ron.
Anything else? We will have more opportunity. I'll make sure that we have opportunity for council's initiatives, but if there's anything burning, let me know.
Ron, real quick, I know a lot of these items and things that we have going on are they're all big ticket items. They're big deals. There's a lot of hands in the cookie jar. And I'd mentioned before that there's like a business development person for Marion County. Have we worked with them at all to get connected? Because I know the one for Yamhill County, and they said their job is to get people in rooms and get decisions done. So when we have stuff going on with the railroad or Marion County trying to get the public works building, their job is to get everybody to answer the phones and get in a room and make decisions. Have we been in touch with them because if so, or if we haven't, I could see how that could be possibly a huge advantage for us. Because it's like herding cats sometimes when you got everybody not wanting to deal with something when we need them to.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a backstory with the whole Marion County thing, and I won't go into it here, but I think we're working the right track with the Marion County, with the elected officials. There's a bit of a backstory. There's some stuff that, maybe wasn't done properly out there, and I don't know if that's impacting this, or if maybe Marion County just changed the way that they look at their public facilities over the last couple of years. They got a new director, and maybe he analyzed that asset for something different. So I don't think it's, I really think it's just back to a policy level. The mayor and I both outreached the commissioners, and and we just said, you were the guys that offered this to us years ago. Are you still interested or aren't you? It really can't be used. That particular location can't be used for anything but a public facility. So an individual company can't buy it and turn it into a business because it's zoned public.
Right.
And it wouldn't meet the criteria to be rezoned into anything but public property. So it really only has two uses: park amenities or public works shop, its current use. That's the only two the only two uses that can really occur there. There's some complications with that property. There could be some environmental impacts there from years and years of use as a public works facility, and it's located just feet from the river. And the question is, if there is an environmental impact, we don't know. Do we need to know that first? And whose responsibility is it to figure that out? And so those are the complicated questions that I think has held up the transfer of that property. Now, what I've said to Marion County, and we work with their community prosperities person, their representatives. We've worked with their economic development folks. So we're plugged in with everybody at all levels there. And what I've said is maybe the city could use our community prosperity grant to do the environmental assessment. I mean, we got a grant, right? We've got another one coming for $15,000. If that's what it takes to determine if this property comes to the city, let's do that. But I think it would be ill-advised for the city to just accept it, knowing there could be an environmental problem that close to the river, because you could go from having a blank piece of property to being obligated to millions of dollars worth of cleanup. And I think that could be one of the things that's complicated the transaction, but we don't know. Now there's a lot of grants. One of the grants that is underutilized is brownfields grants. There's a lot of grants through Business Oregon to do environmental cleanup. And I have a feeling that there will be even more available with the current federal administration. But there's never really been, a shortage of those types of grants available. Those are always been high priorities. So I think I think part of it is just getting everybody on the same communication channel. But yeah, we're in communication with those folks. I mean, if you have personal relationships with somebody over there that can grease a cog, feel free to let me know and reach out to them or whatever.
Yeah, the person I know that does the Yamhill stuff, they said that the guy that handles Marion County really likes to work with the small town projects.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a little bit of a light switch for me of if they're good at helping writing grants and getting some money into a city and helping with some development changes and some that we only have so many people. So yeah. if they've came across hurdles in other cities that they've helped with, that they know exactly who to call and maybe go, oh, we don't need to talk to this person. We need to talk to this person because this happened over in, I don't know, Jefferson or something. Then that could probably really be helpful and save us some time of just running around, or maybe not.
Yeah.
that might be the case, but
and that's how the community prosperity grant program that we're into now, this cycle where we're getting awarded 3 years of a set amount. Years ago, that was just a competitive process, and you would put in an application when you had a project, and they would cap it. And it was when they hired their new business representative, him and a couple of other staff came out and they did a circuit of all the small towns. And one of we talked about all of these projects and things we've got going on. We talked about the Main Street undergrounding the power. We talked about the feasibility of, maybe some sort of clean energy program where there would be a, Pacific Power, Marion County, a city partnership. Maybe we could use some of the land we own as solar farms, different things like that. We roundtabled all kinds of stuff, these things included. But the idea of the 3-year grant was spurred from those meetings. Because one of the things we said is if we knew we could get a grant every year, we could probably go out and leverage some debt for a larger project than, just shelter or a swing set or, something like that. I mean, if we knew that the county was going to give us a set amount every year for 5 years, then, you know, we could do $100,000 project and pay it off in increments over 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And so that was one of the ideas behind it. But yeah, I wouldn't say that we are connected with every resource that's out there, but you know, we do try to form those partnerships and talk to those folks whenever possible. But don't hesitate to bring somebody up, because it may not be somebody we're connected with, or that person's changed.
Yeah.
And somebody else is
I'll reach out to them and then get their contact info, and I'll talk to them and get their info over to you. So then maybe it's somebody you've already talked to, or maybe
Okay.
maybe it was someone you talked to and something new just rolled out because of all the havoc that happened last year, and now the floodgates might be open to get some big projects done. So
Well, thank you.
yeah, I'll look into that and get the info over.
Excellent.
Hey, so kind of
You muted Mayor there. Sorry.
Yeah.
There we go. My computer's being funky. Hey, just to piggyback kind of off of what he was saying, I would like to, during one of the meetings, set aside a little bit of time for us to brainstorm a bit about some of our advocacy for our small businesses. And with that, you know, I think we're hitting that point where it's coming up that we may need to look at joining like the State and Sublimity Chamber of Commerce, or starting to lay the groundwork for our own. You know, we're kind of hitting that population point where we're going to see some of these franchises wanting to come in. I wouldn't be surprised within the next couple of years here if we have, you know, fast food wanting to move in at some point.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to at least have a discussion about, one, how are we going to advocate for our small businesses that are currently existing here in town? And two, what are we going to do to help cultivate those businesses that we want to see coming into town?
Yeah.
Whether that's working with a chamber through some sort of outreach, or whether that, you know, takes the form of us being more directly involved, but potentially in the interchange development area. However we want to go about it, but at least set some time down to discuss it.
Yeah, I think when we have the interchange development discussion, that might be a better opportunity to ponytail on what you're talking about. If that sounds good with you.
Yep.
I actually worked the better part of today working on some ideas that I developed for the possibility of the ID zone development, and how we might be able to bridge that gap between cost benefit analysis over developing versus those improvements. And I actually vetted some of those with our land use attorney, just to make sure, you know, I'm throwing these ideas out there, but do they have merit? And so I spent a good part of the day working on that plan for one of our sessions. And I think we've got a good plan going forward. Just an update, that property, those larger parcels, all were listed for sale. And I have had conversations with some potential developers on that. And so, you know, one of the things I have told some of the potential developers, and these are folks that understand, you know, they come into a project like that. It's not uncommon that they have to put in a intersection and a roadway, and you know, these are all that's very typical for a development like this. So they're you know, they're not individuals that are trying you know, to do a development project. They're developers that understand that they're going to make this investment. But there's a point where you add all of those things up, and then, you know, it's not as attractive of an investment. You know, there's more attractive, less risky investments. And so what we need to do is bridge that gap. We could be a member of the chamber currently if you wanted to do that. I'm not a member. We were a member for years, and I didn't renew that for a couple of reasons. I started to be part of that sublimity state and chamber. The difficulty there was they spend all their time they spend all their time advocating for, you know, Staten, and there's very little. I've had a number of meetings with the chamber directors, and there's been a couple of chamber directors, and they're, you know, they're just we don't have enough members to rise to that level to supersede you know, that sublimity area. But we could join and just be an active person. We do have businesses within the city that are members. That's an easy thing to do, so we can certainly do that. I've also outreached to the Rotary. There's a very active Rotary group over there. And they have had more on and off activity in the community. One of the difficulties that we have is a lot of our businesses are owned by people that aren't from here. You know, they live elsewhere. And so they're less likely to get involved in those membership groups and to take an active part. And so without that core group of businesses, it's difficult for us to leverage that service. And chambers aren't, you know, chambers provide a venue for your business to be noticed and advertised, but they're not, their service would not be to attract development into your community. That's really our job. And I think how we do that is we could do that through an economic leakage analysis, you know, where we've done that a few years ago. It's been quite a few years ago now, but we could update that, where we would hire a company to come in and they would do an analysis based on all of the shopping habits of the people within our demographics, and then identify potential areas of leakage that then we could use to go and try to advocate for some of those businesses to come in. But I really think that for the interchange development, my opinion is, if we really just work on the mechanics of making that project pencil out, I think those developers will do that work for us. And we may be better invested in the supporting them than doing a document that may or may not meet their needs. But I'm happy to talk about that and vet that out some more. But I think let's hold this conversation over until we conclude the interchange development property conversation. Then we can bring that back up and see if there's some holes there. But if you guys want the city to be a member of any organization, we've got you know, the budget and stuff to do that today, so we can do that at any point.
Yeah, we can have that conversation at that time. That's fine.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything? Do you have anything, Andrew?
That was my main biggie.
Yeah,
Angie?
those are it, yeah.
All right. Well, just to highlight what's next on our agenda, on the 16th, we're going to talk about sewer at nauseum, as a matter of fact. I do have a few other things that I'll try to fit in as we go through these conversations, just to break it up. But just to give you a little preview, we've got a number of videos about sewer. We have a video presentation we're putting together on our sewer treatment process, and we're actually going to walk you through our treatment facility, because we can't physically all go out there on a tour, which is what I originally had planned. And then we're going to show you a recently built mechanical system through a video tour. And you know, these aren't going to be comprehensive tours. They're 5 to 10 minute videos, but it's enough for you to see, you know, what we're talking about when we're talking about some of these new facilities and what they might look like and how they might operate. And so that's next. We'll have our consultant from West Tech Engineering that's working on the capital facilities plan there. We'll talk a little bit more about this process, where we're at with DEQ and what that means. We've actually had, you know, good news, bad news with DEQ through our negotiations. We're getting that permit written right now. And there is some good news in that they originally had some of these discharge numbers, at a much more stricter number, and they've kind of lightened up on those a little bit through our conversations. And that equates into dollars at the end of the day. Although, you know, there's still a process, there's still money that has to be spent. Like I said, it could be the difference between lowering it from a $16 million project to, you know, a $5 or $6 million project. So I don't know until the permit's written in the capital facilities plan where that will end up. But I do know we are having some good successes there. And, you know, I feel good about the direction we're going, even though we got some challenges. We have a whole list of capital facilities. We're going to bring forward efforts to redo the capital facilities plans. The mayor and I talked about this earlier, and we talked about it with you at the last council meeting. So we'll bring those forward as project specifics with funding to be approved. And we know already doing sewer, but we need to do water, stormwater, and our transportation facility plan. Those three need to get done. So we'll have bids for you. We'll have projects to approve, and we'll get started on those right away. They'll take several months to complete. And then we've got a number of projects for you to consider, and we've got ideas for funding to lower the burden on the community. And so we just got a lot of good stuff coming. And it just needs to be discussed, and you need to check the box on those things and say, go forward and do good things. We're doing research on the public works facility. We're doing some engineer analysis on the fill out there to make sure that, you know, building that building will be stable. And then we're putting some costs together on that. So a lot of good things happening. We'll do the sewer presentation at the next meeting. And then after that, we'll have water and ID zone and economic development. Those three will be rolled into the third meeting. And as always, if there's anything specific you want us to talk about or bring up, just let me know, shoot me an email.
Sounds good. Is that everything, Ron?
Yeah, it's everything. Thank you guys for 3 hours. I know you're tired. It's hard to sit for 3 hours at these meetings, but I do think we're giving you that information to start building from.
I don't think the belly full of taquitos helped, but you know, it is what it is. All right. Well, if that's the case, I got 9:02. We can go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
All right, good night, everybody.